anytime I feel like you're buying something from a corporation or something along that nature, how much more challenging do you think that was than something else with just
Yeah.
like speed of the closing, whatever due
Yeah.
diligence you had to do? I have to imagine there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah, for sure. So we made the offer in September of that year. We were under contract in October. We closed in March. It was a long, painful process because they were doing all of the mineral rights stuff. There's also a right of way, a gas way, right of way on the property. So those three lines are still active. So we had to get sign off on some of that stuff. The state wanted us to remove all of what was remaining, the trailer and the tanks that were compressing the gas. They wanted all of that stuff removed prior to closing. So it was just a lot of back and forth, but there was just a lot of what's active, what's not in terms of the gas lines. There was a lot of that kind of stuff, which it was just, for us, hurry up and wait.
We got Mike Kuhlkin here. Welcome to the Land Podcast. How you doing?
Good, Jake. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It sounds like we're going to get into a can of worms here on your first property, and can of worms are good because, unfortunately, I guess fortunately and unfortunately, may help someone else, which is obviously the good thing here. And so, go ahead, introduce yourself, and we'll dive right into this.
All right. So I'm a pastor in Perry, New York, which is kind of in the southern tier, western part of New York State. Have hunted for probably 40 years, close to 40 years, and we have been on borrowed property and leased property and public property, and finally made the plunge about 7 years ago to purchase property. So that's kind of where my family. I've got 4 kids, and my wife and I finally made the decision to take that plunge. So, and it was kind of an interesting road to get there. Families always those dynamics of you're raising kids, you want them to be in the woods, you want to get them involved. I was in a camp with my dad and my brother-in-law and his father-in-law, and we ended up bouncing from one camp to the next, and we were in the Adirondacks for a while. And whether it was divorce or somebody deciding they wanted to do something different with their property, or the cabin that we were using in the Adirondacks, they decided they wanted to take it back for family stuff. So that was kind of what brought me to a place of saying, gosh, someday I really want to own my own property. So
Yeah, that's the thing with every permission parcel, every lease, anything where you don't own it. It seems like there's this a clock where something's going to change, and rightfully so. Like I'm always super thankful to hunt any property by permission or an opportunity to pay to hunt
Yep.
a piece, but they all come with a clock because life changes for everyone, and no matter how great you are with the landowner and how much you treat them well and everything else, like ultimately things change, and I think that's the beauty of land ownership is you get to decide how long you own it.
Yeah.
What when that happened, what was kind of the process of, I'm sure you had dreamed of buying your own piece. What was that transition, and
Sure.
did you feel like you set yourself up for that moment, or was it kind of like, hey, we have to regather our thoughts and get a game plan, and hopefully in a year or two we'll buy something? Where were you
Yeah,
at?
that's pretty accurate. We at that point, my dad was retiring from Eastman Kodak, and we had been hunting in the Adirondacks quite a bit. And I convinced him to go look at a couple properties, and we did. We drove around and we looked at them, and uh, because I felt like he had the money, I didn't.
Fair.
And so, what we actually settled on was we connected with a leasing company in Indiana who had listings in New York. So we leased a property for about 10 years, and in that time frame, we kind of my wife and I were getting our finances straightened out. I had done 2 master's degrees when we were paying those off, and having kids, and all the stuff that goes with that. And then kind of the thing that put us over the edge was in 2017, we moved from Rochester, New York, down to the southern tier. And I moved from being a youth pastor to a senior pastor, which meant there was a house of free housing, parsonage. So all of a sudden, no mortgage payment, and we had we cleared, I don't know, it was close to 50,000 in profit on our home. And New York is kind of funny with that, with the capital gains. If you have lived in the house for more than 2 years, you can take an exempt on property gains. If you have invested in remodeling the home and it's equal or greater than the amount of profit you made, you can take an exemption. So we walked away clear with about 50,000, and uh, we were heavily invested in Dave Ramsey at the time. So we we paid off our vehicles, paid off all the loans, and now we're sitting with about 10,000 banked and no debt, which was
How long did it take you to go through the baby steps of Dave Ramsey, or was it kind of like all pretty
oh,
quick after you sold your
well,
house?
it had probably been 6 or 7 years to really, that snowball stuff, paying that off. The idea of having $1,000 emergency fund saved, I thought that's ridiculous. I'm not
Yeah, it's
gonna,
not a lot of money. Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot of pizza and coffee to skip to save, or
Yeah.
suddenly I needed a new bow or something, and suddenly. So it took a couple years before we really were both on it. My wife is fantastic as with finances and saving. I was the spender in our marriage, and it took me a while to get there. Um, but having that, all of a sudden, having that money to be able to pay those things off helped me to really get on board and say, okay, we really have a shot at paying stuff off, and we did. So that fall, the fall of 2017, the church that I moved to said we need to start looking at new buildings. We're in a 100-year-old building. We're outgrowing it. So we were looking at property and met with a realtor. We decided that property wasn't right. And so at the end of that meeting, I just offhanded mentioned to the realtor, if you ever come across 50 acres in the area, let me know. I would be interested. And he said, well, I have 20 acres available right now. I said, well, that's a little smaller, but let's go walk it. So my wife and I walked it, and we felt like it was, ideally, I mean, it was 6 miles from our house. And so it was kind of an ideal situation there. I knew the farmers who owned both sides of the property, and they would give us permission to hunt both of those. So it kind of just felt like, all right, let's try this. And they were asking 107,000, which was way more than we wanted to pay. And so my wife, being
The
the
saver?
person the person she is, she goes, well, let's do something crazy and offer 50.
Whoa.
Yeah, she's really crazy. So we offered him 50, and the gas company who owned the property came back to us and said, well, it's been on the market for 10 years. We'll take 57. We got to get 57.
Wow.
So we said, deal.
It
We're
was
on
listed
it.
for sale for 10 years?
Yeah.
Oh
I mean,
my gosh.
so a little about the property. It was a gas consolidation piece. So it was operational till about 1984, and all these farms around us, there's a lot of natural gas, and so what they would do is they would ship the extra natural gas that they weren't using, would get siphoned off, come to this place, to this property, get consolidated, and then shipped on down the line towards Rochester and Buffalo. And it's funny, we bought it from Standard Gas of New York, and they are headquartered in Arkansas. I don't know why that is, but so we had to chase down this guy in Arkansas to get different reports and different clearances and stuff. And they ceased operation in '84, and then it was back and forth. They thought, well, we might do some prospecting. They called it, see if there's actually gas there. And I think they just held on to it and held on to it, and finally, decided they would sell it. Well, the neighbors are all like, we didn't even know it was for sale. I said, well, it's been on the market for 10 years. So, yeah, pretty crazy.
That's a very unique. I think that's I get writing a lowball offer. It's been on the market for 10 years. I get that. I would advise people something that's been listed for a month. I wouldn't go in and write half, you know,
So,
half the listing price on that. But that sounds like a pretty unique example. And so, anytime I feel like you're buying something from a corporation or something along that nature, how much more challenging do you think that was than something else with just
yeah,
like speed of the closing, whatever due
yeah,
diligence you had to do? I have to imagine there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
yeah, for sure. So we made the offer in September of that year. They accepted it mid October was when we got we were under contract, and I asked just on a whim, can we hunt it? And they said, yeah, for sure. And you can chase anybody out that might be on there. Um, Actually shot a deer that year on the property, which was kind of an interesting story. My daughter was pretty young. I think she was 15 at the time, and tried to shoot. Her gun didn't fire, and then got on the radio and said, "Dad, there's a nice buck coming your way." And it came over to me, and it looked like a doe. So I thought, well, I'll shoot the doe, and maybe the buck will go back towards her.
Hmm.
Well, it was a spike. I didn't notice it, but to be able to be on land that you're soon going to own. So then, so we were under contract in October. We closed in March, um, March 15th, I believe it was, and it was a long, painful process, because they were doing all of the mineral rights stuff. There's also a right of way, a gas way right of way on the property. So those three lines are still active. So we had to get sign off on some of that stuff. The state wanted us to remove all of the what was remaining, the trailer and the tanks that were compressing the gas. They wanted all of that stuff removed prior to closing. And winters in New York are pretty tough in this area. We get a lot of lake effect snow. So you're looking at 4 feet of snow and trying to get an excavator and a bulldozer back in there. We finally got them to relent on that. They said, okay, you can remove all of that stuff after closing, but you got to get rid of it. So it was just a lot of back and forth. And I think, truth be told, my lawyer, knowing him now, 8 years later, was not real active. He's kind of got that reputation a little bit. Um, but there was just a lot of what's active, what's not in terms of the gas lines. There was a lot of that kind of stuff, which it was just, for us, hurry up and wait.
Hmm.
So then we put 12,000 down, and we took a loan for the remaining 42,000, and that was, I think it was like a 4.7 rate at that point, but it was only that for the first 3 years, and then it was a flexible kind of. And this was my first dive into it, so I didn't understand all of that until we started digging up information for for this podcast, and realized, well, how did we sign for 4 and now it's at 8%?
Hmm.
Um, and turns out that it flexes every 3 years. Or every 2 years, there's some flexing in that, and we didn't really care because we're paying it off quickly.
Sure.
It's a 15-year mortgage, and we're on technically year 7, and I think if you look at it, we've got like 18,000 left because we're paying twice as much.
Yeah,
So,
adjustable rate mortgage, and then a 15-year mortgage. Definitely, you read the Dave Ramsey book because he's a big
yeah,
15-year mortgage guy.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, my whole life, I thought I'll never be able to afford it. Certainly never thought I'd be able to afford a 15-year. Um, but it's $400 a month,
Yeah.
which is very doable. And like I said, we're paying 1,000 a month on it, trying to just knock it out.
Hmm.
Um, so that was one of the things that I learned in this whole process is, this is doable. Like, now granted, we don't have a mortgage payment because we're in free housing kind of thing, but it is doable. Um, I wish I had done it a lot sooner. And my dad has said the same thing. He goes, we should have just bought land right from the start. So
Yeah. Well, that's funny because that's a common theme
yeah,
of even the most active people that are really active in real estate. They wish they would have done more and sooner. Um, and I just always find that interesting and reassuring. And I think that listeners should find reassurance in that too. Of obviously there's survivor bias of like, yeah, it went well, so of course you would have done more.
yeah,
But at the same rate, it's just interesting to hear those words come out of your mouth, just like a lot of other people that said, "Man, I don't really regret buying
yeah.
anything. It's the stuff I regret is what I didn't buy," which is interesting.
And I mortgage stuff, that, what did you call it? That flexible rate?
Adju
Is that adjustable?
Adjustable rate mortgage, yep. Which
Yeah,
a
so
lot of
that
a lot of land loans are adjustable rate mortgages. There are some lenders out there that do long-term fixed rates. Usually, they're a little bit higher, but adjustable rate mortgages, whether it's a 2 year, I would say the most common are probably a 3 to 5 year adjustable rate mortgage, but they could be two. I mean, they could. I'm not a
yeah,
lender, but they can be pretty flexible,
okay,
which is sometimes a point of negotiation too. When you're working
yeah,
with a bank and say, hey, instead of a 2 year arm loan, can we do a 5 year or a seven? And they may have a moving rate for that too, where it's like, yeah, the two is 5.5%. I'm just making this up, and but the 5 year fixed is going to be 6%, and so you kind of get to pick
mhm,
what makes the most sense for what you want to do.
yeah. So we were so green in doing that, and then to find out, 5 years later, 7 years later, I thought, "Oh, man, did I mess this up?" So it's comforting to hear you say that it's pretty common, but I just didn't probably pay close attention to all of that, and just thinking we're gonna just pound it out and pay it as quickly as we can. I didn't even think about negotiating some of that stuff.
Well, it's one of those things. It's like you don't know that you can do that. It's
Yeah,
not like it's they slide the paper across the desk and you're like, all right, that's all it is. I have
right,
no that's it is what it is, and there's nothing I can do about it. And
yeah,
all lenders are different, so I don't want to like give this false
right,
narrative that yeah you can go in there and negotiate
yeah,
2 points lower and 5 years longer before it adjusts. I don't think that's the case, but
yeah.
it's
Now
it's a
the
point of
one
it's a point of discussion for sure.
the one thing I think we did do that was right was we went with a small local bank, that handles a lot of the land. We're in an ag country, so they handle a lot of that. Very, very accommodating, very easy to work with. They were, and I do feel like there was probably some more flexibility there. They especially, I mean, they see land sales without primary residence on it all the time. And so that was not anything new. Our original bank was like, well, no, there's no home on this. We're not comfortable without some kind of collateral kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so that was and I think I caught that actually on one of your podcasts that you had talked about or suggested using the um, smaller
Yeah.
lenders. So
Any bank that truly understands recreational land is going to be leaps and bounds, probably easier to deal with, just
yeah.
because they understand that they understand. Um, a good indication is
Mm,
if it's called the tabletop appraisal, and so what that means is they're so in tune with the market that they feel pretty comfortable. Basically saying, "Yep, that's what it is. We don't need to go, have you pay for an appraisal for $1,500 or $2,000
yeah.
because we know the market that well." And a lot of bank. The first farm I ever bought, local bank, um, and they didn't order an appraisal. They're like, "Yep, that seems like it's within line of the market, and you're putting enough down. We don't need to order an appraisal," which saves you some money. So there's a lot of nuances, and I feel like people get bored of me saying that shopping for a bank is just as important as shopping for a farm. But
Yeah.
just based off your experience, I would assume you would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the real fun began after closing, right? So um, there were a lot of things I really didn't think about or know. So we decide we're going to put a cabin on this property, and it's landlocked. It had a deeded right of way. That was one of the other things we had to get in writing that was that right away was deeded. Well, once we decided to build on the property, no, you have to own that right away.
Hmm.
So I had to go to the farmer, um, create a whole contract with him. He sold us this. The right of way is a third of a mile. He sold that to us for $5,000, and then they don't like flag lots, so now I have to buy road frontage as well. I don't know if to park a fire truck or what, but 50 feet by 200 feet measured from the center of the road is what I had to have road frontage, which was basically a ditch and half of the road. So I said, if I'm going to own half the road, I'm putting up a toll booth. And
Right. Yeah.
the town laughed and said, well, that's fine as long as you keep it under 4 feet by 4 feet, because you'd have to pay for a building permit or something. They went along with me, but fortunately, because we had already bought this property, we could have really been stuck, but this farmer agreed to do that. And basically it just changed hands, but it doesn't change. He uses it for farming, to get access to his fields, and it changed hands, but now he's got the deeded access. So that was the first thing. Then the second thing was we're building a cabin, and that's not your primary residency. You've got to get a variance for that. Didn't know that. So there was all of this wrestling with that, and then having to take the gas well or the gas consolidation stuff down. How do I do that, and where does it go, and is there gas in those? Well, supposedly there wasn't. The natural gas was all cleared out of that compression site. Well, then I tear it all down, and probably within 6 months of that, a guy shows up and said, well, we own the gas lines here. Like, well, that was not anywhere in the, in our documents and that kind of thing. He says, you're lucky you didn't blow yourself up. There's gas running in one of these lines over here. So
Oh my gosh.
it was a whole new ball of wax between dealing with the town and the village and this company. And he rerouted his line. It's still on our property. He promised, gas for life, free gas for life. Of course, that has gone away because New York is now saying no new hookups, and it just got to be this huge mess. And there's things that, man, I really wish I had known about stuff prior, like flag lots, like we built this cabin. Well, in the process of doing that, we found that there's a good active water well on the property.
Mm.
That was nowhere listed. That would have been $10,000 to drill a well at 128 feet.
Mhm.
There was 6 telephone poles, and the wiring was all good. So electricity, we were able to bring that in, and those poles would have been about $5,000 a piece. So with all the headache of doing that, knowing that there's a usable potable well and the 6 poles and the power line, that basically would have, to do that would have cost what we paid for the property. So feeling pretty good. Like, if I need to offload this, we could offload it at a profit and do it pretty quick.
Mhm.
So the other piece of that then is that the neighboring farmers, one of them has taken down the woods to be able to plant more. And my wife and I were on the same page in terms of, hey, we're going to buy this property. It's going to be multi-recreational use. We'll hunt it, but we'll also do family reunions and four-wheelers or whatever.
Cookouts and yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Since then, we're doing chickens and pigs and bees and apple trees and all that stuff. And now with the property next to us gone, I'm kind of thinking, all right, let's offload this. We'll take the profit and roll it into the next piece.
Mhm.
And my wife, because I've gotten off of the same page, she is not so excited about that.
She wants to stay right where you guys were at.
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
Because it's there's a sentimental value now to it. And she's, it's like I said, 6 miles. We go over every day to check the chickens and to feed the pigs and do all of that stuff. But I'm kind of feeling like, I'd like to be investing in a piece that's a little more suitable for hunting. now that the trees, the wood block next to us is gone.
Is there? Do you have a strategy? So you're on pace to pay this farm off early.
Yep.
Do you envision a time where you borrow against your current farm to go buy another satellite farm or another 20-acre piece?
Yes. See, that's where we're at right now is how do we without selling this, is there a way to leverage it into the next farm?
Hmm.
And I don't know if they will do what do they call that? A home equity line kind of thing. I don't know if I can do a HELOC off of a piece of property like
You,
this. But
yeah, you should be able to get a line of credit off that farm. So let's say it's worth it's paid for free and clear,
yep.
and it values at $200,000. And let's say the loan to value the bank will allow you to borrow against. So I'm just going to do this quick math. Um, and so let's say 80% loan to value. So you could borrow 160,000 out of that farm
Yep.
to go buy the next one. And so maybe you went and found another farm that's 160,000.
Yeah.
Then you could technically pay cash for it and then pay off your line of credit. I mean, there's
Oh wow.
a lot of different financial instruments there, and you definitely want to talk to your bank
Okay.
to understand all the different options that you have. But or maybe you just borrow enough for a down payment and you have a traditional mortgage for the remainder. So there's a lot of different options there, and I would say that's a fair strategy to have in the back of your mind as you pay that off. And you might want to buy another piece
Yeah.
because you have that equity sitting there, and instead of selling it and rolling it, you're just going to borrow against it.
Yeah. That was part of the questioning is okay, what do we do next? And how do we do that? How do you roll it? And so that was was the next step for us was to begin to investigate some of that. So that's encouraging that is possible. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine. Let me ask you this, because you guys did the date. You went full
mhm.
Dave, paid off all your debt, and then you're like, all right, we're gonna go buy a piece of ground and not pay cash, which is. I fall in the same school of thought here, so like I'm not picking on you. I went
No, no.
as soon as I got out of college, I paid off all my debt, and I so like very similar path in a lot of ways. But I have a loan on my farm, and so it's like
Right,
not
right.
it is not to a T. So was that a struggle for you guys to say, okay, we're not gonna be able, by the time we save up enough money to pay cash for a farm, we're not gonna be able to even enjoy it like how we want to. So what was your thought
Yeah.
process on that?
Yeah. So Jake, just a little insight into my world. My wife was saying, we'll buy it when we can afford it, right? We'll buy it when we have cash.
Yep.
And I'm kind of that master manipulator. I said, well, if we buy the land, even on a loan, it's an investment, right? Even if we're doing a mortgage, and maybe someday we'll build a house on it. Well, now we're realizing a third of a mile and half of it is open acreage. It fills up. I mean, we have snow drifts over 10 feet. There's
Oh my gosh.
no way you're ever going to live back in there in the winter. Like I fortunately, with a tractor, I can get back there in 2 days.
Hmm.
Um, but so it was. I think it was tougher for my wife to think that way, to think of buying again on loan. Um, but the fact that we didn't have a mortgage here, and as much as we love Dave Ramsey and followed him to the T, we we uh, we probably were in a situation where we would say accept mortgage, accept a house. And we're not, as a pastor, I'm making like 54. She's a recruiter for a company, like a temp company, and so she's close to 70, and we're banking that as much as we possibly can. We have paid cash for vehicles, but I'm driving a 2016 Silverado that's just beat, and it's okay, pay cash for it,
Yeah.
because it's used. And uh, we upgraded her vehicle last year, paid cash for it. So we're doing those things with the exception of a mortgage, and she was willing to come to a place of compromise based on my
Yeah.
manipulations. So
I feel like that's a healthy compromise.
yeah,
I really do, and I think a lot of people have said it you said it too. Anyone can afford land. It's just you got to
Yeah.
organize your life to make it a priority. Um, I mean, do you truly feel that anyone could own a piece of ground?
Boy, it's I think so. At that price, if you are even, I think even if I was carrying a mortgage again, on a house, our house mortgage was 1,200, and that was, taxes all in and everything. Um, I think we would still be able to clear an extra 400. So making the monthly payment wouldn't probably be unreasonable, but it helped that we were able to put 12,000 down in order to get that rolling.
Mhm.
But I think, I don't know, land, if they'll do a 30-year, but we did the 15, and so
Yeah,
that
there's some lenders that do 30, 20, 25.
wow.
Um, my local bank where I bought my first farm, I had that on a 20-year.
Yeah.
They were pushing for a 15, and I mean that was very early in my career where uh, I had just enough money for a down payment, just
Yeah.
enough margin to say like, yeah, I can afford it. And I was like, let's do 20. So I
Yeah.
just have
Yeah.
a tiny bit more buffer. I'll pay some curtailment payments
Right.
too.
Right. Well, and it's funny because my younger son is a forester for the state of New York, and he's actually an arborist, but he's buying his first home,
Mhm.
and he has no college debt because he went to forestry school, and no other debts, and he's able to, he's been approved for a home, and put an offer in. Well, his older brother has a whole bunch of college debt, and in the process of all of this, he's saying, "I'll never be able to afford a house." To come up with 150,000 or 200,000, I'll never be able to afford it. It's just interesting to see the two mindsets. He's the older brother is the one who's, he's got friends, he goes out, does a lot, he lives up in the city. The younger son has it in his head, I want to have a wife and kids and a family and a home. And he's put his nose to that, and he can afford it. So I think it's priorities, right? Like if you want to purchase a piece of land, if you want to own dirt, you put your head down and do it. Stop buying $5 cups of coffee, and you can find $400 or $500 a month to put towards owning land.
Yeah.
That's my take on it, I guess.
Yeah. And even this is just top of mind, but I've spent a lot of time in Iowa with guys that have, I call that era of Iowa when you're buying like in the 90s or 2000s was like the gold rush for whitetails. I mean, it really
Yeah.
was. People didn't realize what it was, and it was just right place, right time. But the question, or I guess a lot of people say, you're like, oh well, you can't do it now, or but they
Mhm.
all say you can. You just got to start smaller, and it's that's still in the game.
Yeah.
Whether it's 10
Yeah.
acres or 15 acres or 20 acres. I mean, that's still the start of buying land, and it's
Yeah.
like these guys have done it, and they're kind enough to share words of encouragement too, and rather like, nope, I'm smarter than you, and I was luckier than you, and you can't do it. But they're all, yeah, you can do it. To start smaller.
Yeah. And that's exactly, I mean, we wanted 50 acres. But 50 acres in this area, so tillable land is somewhere between 8 and 14,000, and wooded land is about 5,000 an acre,
Okay.
which just seemed out of reach to me. And so 50 was probably a lofty goal. Now I'm at a point, and after doing all the habitat management on this property, I mean, it is really, we've had to make some concessions because of multi-use, but we're killing 3.5-year-old bucks, which was our goal. I think I'd love to try it on 100 acres and see if
Oh
I
yeah.
can do that. And
Yeah.
so um, that's where I get worried. Okay, we could roll this and probably come away. We could sell this property, I think, for easily 100, 125, easily. um, I could roll that money, but that's where we got stuck with my wife. She wants to hold on to it, and so now this idea of looking into a loan off of that, I'd be more willing to try that now, and investigate doing some of that. Um, I think you got to get in the game, right? If it's 15 acres or if it's 20 acres, we have at least here, we've had a ton of fun. We've enjoyed working in the woods. We timbered it one year. We did a select timber, took 20 hickory trees off and made $14,000.
Wow.
And that went back into property development stuff. So I think there's ways. You just have to get in the game, like you said, and be creative, be willing to try some things, and the potential is there, I think. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I would agree with that. Do you think that, do you believe that land ownership is still the original American dream? I mean, and so I will preface it with this. So, like with the public land sale, that's on the docket
oh
of the
yeah.
three, and
Oh
so I did some research. Like, is there a precedence of this? And I asked ChatGPT to be completely transparent, and it basically said that it's not. You said you would have to go back a long way, and the thing that it brought up was the Homesteading Act, where
yep.
you go out there and you carve out 40 acres, you live there for a few years, you get to keep it,
Yep.
which was obviously the American dream. It was I was watching a documentary on Theodore Roosevelt, Manifest Destiny.
Hmm.
America was destined to go west,
Yeah.
um, and that's rooted into our culture with land ownership and going west, exploring and carving out a piece of your own. And I think that we're all blessed to be American citizens and live here. Do you think that's true today, or do you think that it's a lost principle of American heritage?
Man, that's a great question. That's a great question. So I can speak for my generation. I think there's still a piece of that. Um, I'm halfway through the hardest worst year or whatever. I forget if that's the title, but it's about the Dust Bowl and stuff. The hardest worst time, whatever it is. And like that spirit resonates in me. Even to go and farm in no man's land, Oklahoma, kind of thing. Is that in my oldest son is 25? No, but it's in his twin sister. She's all about it. So I don't know if it's a generational thing. Their younger brother is 21. He's the one that's buying the house. He wants, he's all about it. Like I want to own land and to we talk a lot about stewarding land, and um, proper care for it, and those two especially are really on it. But the people I interact with here, yeah, I think so. If I interact with the people in the more urban or suburban areas, I think that dream is probably gone to an extent, sadly.
Hmm.
Um, that's a great question.
It
Uh,
just it has me thinking of like that's what America was really built on, was truly
right?
like manifest destiny.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably been lost in translation. And I think that it's this approach of the good days are behind us. But thankfully, I get to interface with so many people that um, don't feel that way. That there's still good times ahead of us, and there's still
Yeah.
great opportunity, and you just got to work harder. Um, and because things are easier in a lot of ways too. We always forget. That's the thing. Everyone says, "Oh, it's way harder now." Um,
Oh,
and there may be some things that are harder now, but there's a million things that are way easier now than
yeah.
what it was before.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely. And my dad was the millionaire next door. He had saved and saved and saved. You never would have thought he had any money. He could have outright bought the property when we were originally looking. But there was priorities there. He wanted to retire and he wanted to have security for his grandchildren, that kind of thing. Um, so that I don't know if it's something that waxes and wanes with generations. Um, but I think there's some, and you can recognize them pretty quick. People who still that still beats well in their hearts. That, hey, I want this. I want to develop this property the way I want it to be, or the way I feel called to, kind of thing. That manifest destiny. There's certainly people that still, I think, have that in them. So, and I get to interact with them some, but I would think you as an agent would probably encounter more of those.
Yeah, I feel maybe not the acquisition of land to farm and homestead and those things, but just about everyone I talk to. it's a standing joke amongst myself, which sounds really lame, but everyone wants to buy some land and build a house.
Yeah.
Everyone, every single
Yeah.
person. I don't know a person that says, "Nope, I don't want to buy land in the country and build a house." Every single person,
Right.
just about wants to do that. So that'd be maybe the closest thing to that.
Yeah. And COVID was interesting. The people in the cities and the urban areas, they're building upward. The buildings are all going up. But we found a lot of people exit those cities and come. We're kind of a bedroom community. We're about an hour from Rochester, and there's a lot of people that are commuting. And I don't know what it was about COVID, but I think in some ways it pushed those folks out of Rochester and Buffalo down this way. And there's
Have
been
you
a
fo-
go ahead.
have you found any return of that population going back? It doesn't seem it seems crazy, but the heart of COVID was like 5 years ago, which
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. But have you noticed any of those people that came down? Remote work's a thing, and then now a lot of the remote work has reversed for some companies. And so,
Mhm.
have you noticed any of that departure back to urban areas?
I- Not that I have seen, but that doesn't mean it obviously that it hasn't happened. But I think what I have seen is people that have come down here and have said, "Oh, this is a great, quaint little rural town," and then they, like we did, we were just before COVID, we dipped our toes into land ownership, which then my wife's saying, "Well, I want to try chickens." Okay, and now we're going homestead. Apparently, we're pigs and long dresses and um,
Do you make your
so
own butter yet?
no, no, we are not doing that yet. But
Okay.
um, and I think there's people I'm seeing there seems to be a movement towards that kind of thing. Like if COVID 2.0 ever were to come around, well, we're going to be prepared because we're raising our own food, kind of thing. And it's not, it sounds like a prepper kind of thing, but that's not
Mhm.
really what it feels like. It feels to me like people are getting a little bit more in touch with the ground and with what the earth provides in a multiple ways. So
Mhm.
maybe I'm just dreaming all of that, but
No, I noticed a lot of the same things, even from a habitat management perspective for whitetails.
yep,
I feel, and once again, I live in a strange echo chamber, but at the same rate, I feel like so many more people are in tune with managing their property outside of just deer and getting all the fringe benefits of pollinator, controlling invasives, introducing native species again, and I don't know. 10 years ago, no one was talking about that. I'm sure
right,
there was people doing it,
yeah,
but it's way more popular, and I feel like that's a um, kind of a shining star
yeah,
of habitat management today because so many people are really in tune with that, and it's hard. It's way more work to do it that way, but a lot of people are up for the challenge, and I think
yeah.
that's awesome.
It's funny you talk about natives and you talk about pollinators. So this 20 acres, if nothing else, has been a proving grounds for us. Like I said, my son's an arborist, my daughter's a forester for New York, both of them for New York State. And we've kind of dipped into a little bit of habitat consulting just based on what we've been learning. But we've gone through and we've obliterated any bush honeysuckle, any multiflora rose. We have worked with some with creative habitat to be planting native seeds and doing pollinators. We've got 3 beehives up and running, and so what we've been learning um, has been a lot of fun. It's 20 acres is plenty to be able to do some experimenting on and to see results. So
Yeah, and it's a very manageable amount of acreage too, because it's a
yeah,
lot of work. What positive responses have you seen from doing that? Because I feel, um, I would love to get a couple different perspectives about like because there's two schools of thought, right? Like, so you take out the bush honeysuckle, what's going to come back? Well,
yep,
you probably some more bush honeysuckle for a while.
yeah,
And so, what have you seen with that response? Have you? I'm just always curious, and I know
yeah,
that every seed bank is different. And what's funny was with Steve Hansen last week, and he
yeah,
killed off some brome grass. And oh man, it was all sorts of this awesome, beautiful prairie. And I was like, "Did you do anything with this?" He's like, "No, I just sprayed it down, and this is what came up." If you do that at my house, you're gonna get a Canadian thistle, garlic mustard, parsnip, and it's just like So I understand that every farm is different and what's in the
Yeah.
seed bed, but what did you notice?
So we did a couple real heavy thinnings in a few blocks of the woods, and we cleared out the dead ash. We cleared out a few of the maples and a few of the basswood. So we probably opened the canopy 70 to 80% in a couple areas. Um, we then we let that go for a year just with the mechanical disturbance of clearing that out, and we're getting a lot of there was some multiflora rose, but a lot of goldenrod, a lot of raspberry, blackberry, that kind of stuff. It's been we've had bear on the property for the first time. The last 2 years, we've had bear that have been on there, and so it's been neat to see the seed bank, as as you said, come up naturally. We want to burn that. That's very difficult in New York, but we'd like to burn it every 5 to 7 years. We have one burn boss in the state, and he lives out near Albany. So it's really difficult to legally do it. Now, some of those blocks may have been burned sometime within the last 7 years, but I don't know
Sasquatch.
anything about that.
Yeah.
So,
Gosh, that's crazy. One guy to oversee the
yeah,
whole entire state because
it's
New
changing.
York's pretty massive.
Yeah, it is. And it's changing. They're working on that. They're training some other stuff, but um, yeah. So the natural seed bank that's coming up, we have been trying to identify, okay, this is what we want to keep, this isn't. The bush honeysuckle, we were pretty quick to bring in red osier, dogwood, and plant some other stuff, allow the spicewood to keep coming. And then the native seeds, in terms of the flowering, part of that gas cut that comes through the property, we till it, or we did till it and put in food plots, but then we keep a section of that we just use for pollinators. And so one of the greatest things is to be able to walk out there, and our beehives are out there, and to just see them swarm in the clover area, and to be swarming those flowers. That was one of the things I used with my manipulating my wife, is I would just cut her fresh flowers, and she just, okay, we can sell the property. But
Say we get to make all new memories and start
that's
all
right.
over.
That's right. So it's been but those are things that living in the suburbs of Rochester, I never got to really try it. Or being on, public land, or even on our lease, we never got to actually get our hands dirty and try some of these things that we're hearing on podcasts or seeing on social media stuff. And so it's just been fun. And to do that, to take that block out of woods and say, oh man, the multiflora rose is coming up like crazy. We got to do something with that, or the buckthorn. And okay, well, what are we going to do? How do we take that out? What are we going to replace it with? How do we keep it from growing back? It's been an adventure for us. So
Yeah.
yeah.
When you would you how would you describe your first motivation of buying a farm? Was it pretty much solely for hunting? If or I guess what percentage of that purchase was for
Yeah.
hunting?
Yeah, it was. I mean, if I'm being truthful, it was probably 100% hunting, and then and I would envision, hey, in the summer we'll go over and we'll do a picnic, or we'll do a family reunion kind of thing. It has blossomed way beyond what I had pictured. I mean, we got a small orchard. It's 8 apple trees, and um, that was one of the first things that went in before the cabin was even built. And then we just kept my kids learning stuff through school, through their
Which is pretty cool. They had a place to go
yeah,
practice what they learned
yeah, yeah,
in university or in their schooling.
yeah. And I taught them all how to use a chainsaw. Now they're telling me everything I've done wrong. So I'm learning still in all of that, and just to see the way some of this stuff takes off when you plant it, and just opening the canopy makes a huge difference. So I never in a million years would have thought, would have put owning land and those things together.
Mhm.
But it's when you own it, um, and we very clearly have the mindset of, we want to improve it. Doug Duran says it's not ours, it's just our time.
Mhm.
And we pretty firmly believe in that. We want to see natives. We want to see it better than when we got it. We want to see the. We don't really manage for deer. We're trying to manage for turkey and grouse. We finally had a grouse on the property last year, and then we feel like if we manage for those two things, we're going to see deer.
Mhm.
And that seems to be the case for us. So
Yeah, the Pandora's box of land ownership is usually motivated with buying for deer hunting, and
yeah.
then once you crack that box open, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much more stuff that
Uh,
this land can provide, and also provide for hunting opportunity too. That was very similar experience to what you had with my experience so far, and so it's always fun to hear other people's perspective on that. And sometimes deer hunters, I think, maybe get an unfair rap of they're just buying that ground to hunt deer.
right.
Well, that's definitely, it could have been 100% of the motivation, but go revisit those people 10 years later, and I bet you their perspective on land ownership is drastically different than what it was when they,
Yeah.
signed the purchase agreement.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And when we first started, it was about having my own place for my own kids to be able to hunt and not get shot at and not have, you know, the first trespasser we caught was a Mennonite kid named Kyle, and he lived right on the edge of the property. I said, "Listen, you can continue to hunt this, but keep an eye on it for me. Everybody else is kicked off." Um, and now he's become his family's just become great friends. He goes to our church, and he's just a good kid. Um, and Out of that, we've built relationships with him and with other neighbors, and it really has been it's become less about keeping people out and more about
Mm,
all of this idea of managing it and allowing, we have people that have come and toured the property, what they want to see what we're doing, and created a consortium around the area for other hunters. And it's just been there's a sense of pride to it, that um, it's not just this is my ground. It's look what's coming off of this ground, and what you can do if you're wise in how you steward the land. So
yeah. No,
mm.
I love that. Any other parting words of advice or encouragement for the guy that's ready to make the jump or make the plunge?
I mean, anything I say is going to echo everything you've ever said, right? I mean, I think you got to get yourself in good position financially. And I always suggest Dave Ramsey. My kids talk about Caleb Hammer.
Oh yeah, he's kind
Basically,
of he's kind of like the PG-13 or maybe rated
yeah,
R. Dave
yeah.
Ramsey.
So, and then I think you gotta. The other thing you say that I would agree with is, man, you got to get in the game. And it doesn't have to be 200 acres. And the reality is, you probably won't buy 200 acres your first time out. But you got to get into it in order to be in it.
Mhm.
And I can very easily see where my 20 acres could roll into 50 acres, into 100 acres, and I never saw that before until I purchased the property.
Mhm.
So get financially straight, and I would ask questions of other landowners. There were a lot of those hoops that I had to jump through. I probably didn't do a great job explaining all of it, but
Mhm.
ask ask questions of other people, what they found leading up to closing and after closing. I'd never been to a zoning board meeting before, and I've been to, I had to go to 6 and have been asked to be on the board now. So I just didn't know, I
Yeah.
didn't know. And fortunately it worked out. But ask questions and ask people who own land, what don't I know that I need to be aware of?
Mhm.
Um,
That's
because
what you'll get in trouble with. Yeah.
yeah,
What you don't
yeah.
know is where trouble could come from. Well, no, I really appreciate your time and sharing your story. Um, there's people that listen to this podcast all across the country, and I know you mentioned you have like a local podcast. So if you want to share that with folks that may be interested in it.
Sure. It's Beards Creek Adventures, and it's just based on faith, family, and stewardship. So we're kind of just talk about the stuff we're learning. But thanks. So Beards Creek Adventures podcast, and you can find it on Spotify or wherever. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank
yeah,
you so much, Mike. When you get ready for the next farm, you have to reach out to me, and we'll have to do a part two.
yeah, yeah, definitely, because we're in that area now where we're talking about it, and I wish I had your number then. And that's the thing too, right? Like you have to learn to trust your realtor. Everybody
Mhm.
kind of thinks there's an idea that your realtor is just looking for their commission too, and we're finding with my sons that's not true. The
The
realtor
good ones,
really,
yeah. I play devil's advocate a bunch, and really ask maybe questions that they don't want to ask themselves,
yeah,
to make sure that it is a good fit, or make sure that they don't have their blinders on. And I'm not the best. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm sure I've made mistakes, but um, yeah, having a good agent is a huge deal.
yeah, yeah, for sure, and especially with this whole delayed sale stuff now, or delayed bids, whatever they call it. That's a whole new world.
I'm not. What do you mean?
So what New York's been doing is that if we want to buy a house, they do an open house on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then they say all bids need to be in or all offers need to be in by Wednesday, and then
Hmm.
we'll choose the best one and let you know on Thursday which one we're accepting.
I see.
So now you're saying, well, how do the houses and property here are going, 100,000, 200,000 over asking, which is just insane. And how do you know what do I offer? If they're saying this is what it's worth. How do I know what to
Compet-
offer?
yeah, that's a sign of a very competitive market.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels sketchy, but that's where
Yeah.
they're at. So
Yeah, well, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, there's been scenarios where you have interest right off the rip, and in 48 hours, all final and best offers need to be in, and we'll go over them all. But it sounds like that's just like a general sales tactic to list something really, really competitive and get a
yeah,
flurry and get into a bidding war. That's interesting.
yeah, yeah, and that escalating offers, you can write
Yep.
that kind of stuff in. It's just I don't know. I'm too old for that. Just give me
Awesome.
some dirt. So
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot more simple. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate your time and sharing, you sharing your story. I'm sure it'll help someone at some point. So thank you.
thank you.